Hello and welcome back to my channel, In Search of Wonder, where everything revolves around mostly books and coffee. So I am fittingly parked outside library that I like to frequent. And before I go inside and do a little bit of browsing and a little bit of library book sale shopping and a little bit of work on my computer in the study area, I wanted to quickly film this introduction to a series of videos that I plan to do on my channel that I'm very excited about. So, you know by now, if you have watched any of my videos, I'm pretty sure even just one video would clue you in on this, that there are two things besides God and my family that I love very much in this world, and those things are books and coffee. Two of my favorite things. And so I am combining those two favorite things into one idea in this series, because I feel like books are kind of like coffee. Now, hear me out. So when I first started drinking coffee, I don't know why I'm buckled in, I'm not driving anywhere. So when I first started drinking coffee, I was a young teenager, and the International Delight had just come out with those canned powdered coffees. You know what I'm talking about? The little rectangular tins. It was like Swiss mocha and Viennese something or other, and I don't know, different European flavors of coffee. And it was mostly sugar, chemical flavorings, powdered cream, and a little bit of coffee. So I love those. My friends and I would drink those. We would have like basically tea parties, but with this International Delight coffee. So yummy, very nostalgic memories there, but honestly not a great deal of coffee. I graduated from there to actual coffee, but still with, you know, a heavy amount of flavored creamer in it, you know, a la International Delight, Coffee Mate, you know, those things. And then as coffee shops started to become very popular in the, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s, it was a great pleasure of mine to go to a coffee shop, Starbucks or whatever, and get myself a flavored latte, you know, pumpkin spice, not vanilla because boring. If a coffee shop had a lavender one, yes, 100%. But as time went on and I drank more and more coffee, I began to be much, much more interested in coffee for coffee's sake and not just the cream and sugar in it. And I even got to the point where when I started doing intermittent fasting, that to do a clean fast, I would happily enjoy a cup of black coffee in the morning. Now the trick is if it's really good coffee, like really good beans, fresh, locally roasted, like, yeah. So I can enjoy a cup of black coffee. I can enjoy a straight espresso shot. I don't do that hardly ever, but I can enjoy it. I don't do the dessert lattes very much anymore because I'm trying to eliminate some sugar from my life. So, but I do love those. It would just be a big indulgence right now. Yeah, that would be really good actually. Right now, my treat is a shaken espresso, an iced shaken espresso if I go to Starbucks, which I'm a snob enough now that I prefer to go to a local coffee shop as opposed to Starbucks because the coffee is way better, but Starbucks is convenient. I mean, so anyways, whatever. I got an iced shaken espresso decaf for the afternoon, 1 packet of stevia, and heavy cream. It's really good, and it just tastes decadent enough. I love it. Anyway, but my standard go-to these days is actually an Americano with a little splash of heavy cream, and I love being able to taste the actual coffee. So I promised that I would connect this to books because this is a booktube video, and so here's the connection. Books are like coffee, you know? Because you have the dessert books that are the easy reads, the fun reads, the entertainment, you know, the books that are similar to, say, watching people, stop texting me, I'm trying to do a video, okay? Hello. Anyways, what was I saying? Totally derailed my train of thought. Oh yes, books like desserts, like rom-coms, like sitting down to watch a 30-minute rom-com, sheer entertainment, not much in the way of intelligence per se, some, you know, social commentary in there, obviously, just because you can't have a book without that, but really, for the most part. Anyways, but mostly just entertaining. Like, you read it to be entertained. You don't want to think. It's just fun, sheer fun. So that's the dessert latte, right? And then you have everything from that all the way up to the more esoteric, richer, thicker usually, but not always. Actually, some short story, actually a lot of short stories would fit in this too, but like books that require more from the reader. It's not just giving to the reader, it requires the reader to put something into it, and it usually is an acquired taste. I don't know many 13-year-olds who love a straight up black coffee or shot of espresso, but the 13-year-old that drinks the frappuccino or the sugar latte might possibly enjoy a straight shot of espresso by the time they get to 40, like me. So it is an acquired taste. It takes a little bit of guidance, maybe, to fully appreciate the depth of this level of novel. Now, I'm speaking of fiction right now. You could probably throw some nonfiction in this too, but I'm just thinking strictly of fiction, any type of fiction, novels, novellas, short stories, that kind of thing. So anyway, so you have the light entertainment, and then you have the heavier, richer novels that require a little more effort and are also more rewarding in that way. So kind of like the difference between buying a frozen pizza at the grocery store or getting pizza at the pizza place in my town that is like certified genuine Italian Neapolitan pizza, baked in you know, super hot oven. You know, there's a difference between them. That's the same thing. They're all enjoyable depending on your time, your circumstances, and how you're feeling. So books are the same way. Now, just a side note, a little bit of a rant here. I have been in circles where people enjoy really good novels and really good literary writing. And there is a heavy tendency in those circles, I've not seen it actually on BookTube as much, but in like Facebook groups and other social media forums and some podcasts, whatever. There's definitely a looking down the nose kind of thing at the idea, the very idea of reading a book strictly for entertainment. And why would you want to read such a shallow piece of, I don't even know what, trite nonsense in their minds. But me, I love all of it. Give me all of it. I'll drink all the kinds of coffees if I'm not trying to lose weight. I'll even drink a sugar latte. I mean, yeah, totally would. And I'll read all the books. Well, okay, I won't read all the books, but all along the range there, from fluffy entertainment to deep and heavy, makes you think, hurt your head to read, they all have their place. So, to my new series that I'm going to be starting here on my BookTube channel, and starting with the very first category today, or type of book or genre, whatever you want to call it. I am going to be sharing my favorite options across the spectrum of books okay, let me start that sentence over again because I lost where I was. I'm going to be sharing my favorites across the spectrum of books, from fluff entertainment to rich, heavy reading, my favorites in a certain category or genre or type of book. And I'm so excited. We're going to get started with one of my favorite eras to read about, which is Regency, which stems from my deep-seated love for all things Jane Austen. So yeah, since I love Austen, I just always want more and more, and so I got really sucked into Regency. And there is a lot of Regency fiction out there that, you know, there's a lot of like dime a dozen, same type of storyline, etc., etc. But there are some that stand above the crowd all across the genre, from fluffy entertainment to, yes, heavier reading, because newsflash, they actually wrote books in the Regency era. Pretty good books too, actually. So, and I will be sharing my favorites in those, but I will do that when I am at home so that I have actual copies to show you. So this will be kind of like a split in half sort of video. I'm here in the sunshine with the little green bushes at the library. Next time you see me in a second here, I'm going to be at home in front of my library at home. And poof, here I am. So we're going to start with my first introduction to coffee, which was that instant international delight, sweetened powder, creamy, sugary, little bit of coffee drink. Instant coffee. Dun dun dun. And in that category, ladies and gentlemen, we have the easy fun reads by a variety of authors. In no particular order, here are a bunch of authors that I enjoy their light Regency romance fare. All of these authors, their books, at least all that I've read and what they are known for mostly writing, is either Christian or clean, closed-door romance set in the Regency era. So Sarah Ladd is the first one. The first book that comes to mind when I think of her is The Weaver's Daughter, which is about a weaver's daughter. And it gets into some of the issues that are tackled in some heavier books, actually, like about the Luddite rebellion, basically with the growing influence of manufacturing, how that affected the artisans and the people who had made items, goods by hand for centuries, for generations in their family, and that tension that resulted in the early to mid 19th century. So that's the first one that comes to mind by Sarah Ladd, but she has quite a few books. All very good. Michelle Griep is another one. Some of hers are set in Victorian times. Some are set in Regency times. I just finished and talked about in one of my recent weekly wrap-up videos about a book I read by her that was set in the very, very early Regency, maybe just before Regency, called A Heart Deceived. That was very good. I comment often in my reviews of her books that she has some very Dickensian characters. So I really love her larger than life kind of characters that she has in her books that really kind of stand out. And again, not always light and fluffy romance as the main course of the book. There's usually something else that she's tackling in there. And the one I read most recently, it was mental illness and the plight of a woman who was subject to the whims of her brother, who was mentally ill, but also had no power or agency of her own. So they're not always easy reads. That's not necessarily what I'm meaning here. Just tackled in a in a lighter format that's easier to digest. Let's put it that way. So then we have some other authors that I love. Kristi Ann Hunter is another one. She has a series, something about refuge, that I really enjoyed. It was about a home for women who had illegitimate children, and it was a safe place for them. Very cool series, really enjoyed that. And then another one is Erica Vetsch, who writes a lot of Regencies. Hers often have like some kind of spy or mystery element to it as well. Carolyn Miller is one that I really love. Her stories always really pull me in. Sometimes her storylines are inspired by well-known classic books. One, and I cannot remember what it was called. Always forget what it's called. But one, the main character struggled with depression, and I thought it was very, very well done. That was a good one. Can't remember what it's called though. Her more recent series, the Regency Wallflower series, I read the first two in it. Dusk's Darkest Shores, I really enjoyed that one, really good. And it's about a young woman who has a bit of a healing touch, and she is hired to assist a gentleman, a young man in the community who's returned to the community after having fought in the wars, and he is suffering up from PTSD. I think he's blind, and he's struggling to accept his blindness. And it's just really a nice story about how she helps him to see in the ways that matter and helps him to overcome his anger and bitterness over his blindness. And she also helps him to develop the skills he needs to live without his eyesight. So I enjoyed that one. Other authors that I have enjoyed are Ashton Newbold. I have several of hers on my Kindle that I've read and liked. Suzanne Allain, she wrote Mr. Malcolm's List, which was made into a movie, which was the movie was cute and the book was cute. Very fun, like rom-com vibes with that one, but set in a Regency era. So that I enjoyed that one. Sofi LaPorte also has like definite rom-com, very similar vein to that one. And then Regina Scott is another one. And Sally Britton is one that I have a hard copy to show you. I read this one recently, and I think did a short about it. I enjoyed it. It was very good. I had read, I think, one of previous books in this series, and I want to read others in the series and read through them because she has, she builds like a whole community of people. They don't all live in the same area, but they all know each other and are connected to each other some way or another. And this particular one was about a young woman who is learning to be an artist. She wants to have a serious career as an artist, and she's taking lessons from this female artist, and in the meantime it's basically like a fake dating trope but put in the Regency era, which was kind of fun. So those are the instant coffee picks, and now we are moving on to dessert lattes. So what kind of flavoring do you like with your latte? Hazelnut, that's kind of an old, right? Kind of like old style. Vanilla, lavender, orange. Do you go for citrus? Gingerbread, pumpkin spice. Let me know. Pick your poison. What do you like to have in your latte? So these books are still pretty light reads, very accessible for anybody, not too deep into, heavy thoughts or human behavior analysis or anything like that. Just fun reading. The first one is one that not many people know about, and I wouldn't know about it except that I believe the reason I discovered it is my oldest sister worked in a library, and I think that's where she first picked up books by this author and read them, and then she liked it, so we all read them. And now this is one author that I have managed to read all, I believe, of her backlist, which is saying something. So this is Patricia Veryan. Um, so this looks like a typical, romance novel kind of cover. And it kind of is. It's a historic romance novel set in the Regency era. Some of hers are set more in the Georgian era. Some of them deal with like the Jacobite Rebellion and that kind of stuff. This one, though, is set in the Regency era, is my favorite of her Sanguinet series, so Sanguinet is the villain in that series. And so there's a lot of stories written about the various things that he's got various plots that he's trying to um, assassinate the Prince Regent and all this stuff. So this particular one is about a girl named Charity and a young man named Mitchell Redmond who kind of just end up together unintentionally on a journey. And it's hilarious. It's really, really funny. Laugh out loud moments. Some of her books have really laugh out loud moments. Really funny. And also, there's always some kind of swashbuckling sword fight. One thing that stands out about her books is that she really leans into the Regency sense of honor, which is a little bit, honestly, it's a little bit screwed up because there's some double standard going on there. It's not a sense of honor I would 100% buy into, but in that time period, there was a strong sense of honor and chivalry still. And so she really leans into that. And so the men in her stories are real heroes in the sense that they make huge sacrifices for the sake of their country and their families and the women in their lives. So I really like that about those. That's what makes them stand out to me. And in addition to the fact that they're just fun to read, engaging stories that pull me in, and I just want to keep reading to find out what happens, even if I've already read it, because I forgot what happened and I don't know what happens next. So anyways, that one is one of my favorites by her. If you look on my Regency recommendations list on Goodreads, you'll see a bunch more by her and that I would recommend. Then I have Julie Klassen, who, although I've heard some people say Klassen, I'm not actually sure. This is one of my favorites by her, even though it's really just a novella that kind of goes off of another series. But it's one of the popular Regency tropes, or I guess romance trope in general, is bad guy who's really good. I don't know what we call that trope, but there's a guy who seems like he's bad, and maybe he is like a bad guy, like not a good guy, but he either is revealed to be not what you thought he was as the story goes on, or he changes. So this is a little bit of both, and I thought it was really well done. I don't always like that trope because sometimes it's unbelievable, the transformation. Sometimes it's unbelievable that if he's really not bad, but he comes across bad. Sometimes that just doesn't work out. But this is very good. I like how that was done. But it really, the actual series is the Tales from Ivy Hill series. And this is like a village setting. And it's more like, it's just about the people who populate the village, and you get to follow each of their lives and their romances and their family dramas and things going on. It's not one specific character who's the star. So that's fun if you like that sort of read. She has other books that do have, one main plot line, very plot driven rather than character or setting driven. And I have enjoyed almost all of hers. There's one or two that I was like, not my favorite, but she's one of my favorite authors that I will read her books when they come out. Another standout in this section, which if you ask people online who are into Regency, what's your favorite Regency novel? 90% of them will mention these books. And I wish this author would write some more. I don't know. I don't know what happened to her. So Edenbrooke is the first one, and then Blackmoore is the second one. So both of these books are really good. I really enjoyed both of them. Loved the characters, loved the setting, loved the prose, the narration. Everything was, I enjoyed it. So let me read my review of Blackmoore that I have on Goodreads. People seem to either love this one or hate it. Put me in the love it camp. The growth and development of the main character, the slow unraveling of the story, the metaphors and symbolism, the dramatic gothic feel, even the slightly overdone emotions, all contributed to a story that sucked me in and kept me turning pages. Plus, I loved the friends to lovers trope, which was in this one that I'm talking about. I love the friends to lovers trope. That one always works for me. Also, I'm a sucker for a well-done Regency novel. It's true. So this one checks all my boxes. It's Regency and it's romance, but it's high-end Regency romance. So that's that one. Both of those books by her. I think that she has another novella that also kind of is tied into that series somehow. And then my other dessert latte that I have for you is Old Friends and New Fancies, which this one I described it as the first ever Jane Austen fan fiction. But it was written in 1913, so it's over 100 years old now. And the author, Sybil Brinton, she just combines all of the characters, all the main characters from Austen's novels into one kind of romp of a story. And it's a lot of fun. So that's a good one. And now, how do you feel about cappuccinos? Like a real traditional cappuccino. I think they're only 8 ounces technically. Espresso and steamed milk. So, cappuccinos. I have one author on this list, and you can read almost anything by her. And it would be great. It would be funny and unpredictable, a little unbelievable, a little zany maybe on occasion, but altogether delightful. They're really not that old, but some people find her a little bit tricky to follow in the same way, like to read the language, similar to a classic, in part because she uses a lot of Regency slang. She is apparently a real expert on Regency language, Regency customs, etc. And so you really get immersed in the setting, but particularly the language. The characters' dialogue is full of Regency slang. So it takes a little bit to get used to. Some people, if they're not familiar with that sort of language and slang, might find it tricky to understand initially. But once you get into the flow of it, they're really just delightful, fun reads. And this one, Arabella. So Arabella is the one I read most recently, but Frederica is probably my favorite by Hare. So let me read you the synopsis. When Frederica Merivale brings her 3 younger siblings to London, determined to secure a brilliant marriage for her beautiful sister Caris, she seeks out their distant cousin, the Marquis of Alverstoke. Lovely, competent, and refreshingly straightforward, Frederica makes such a strong impression that, to his own amazement, the Marquis agrees to help launch them all into society. Lord Alverstoke can't resist wanting to help her, normally wary of his family, which includes 2 overbearing sisters and innumerable favor seekers. Lord Alverstoke does his best to keep his distance, but he finally finds himself far from bored. In a lot of her books, like the hero of the story, the guy, like his whole life is just like turned on end by the girl in this story, by her antics and, not being intentionally silly usually, because that would be annoying, just unintentionally things going awry because she is who she is. So always sets up pretty funny scenarios. So that's for cappuccino. How about an Americano? How do you feel about Americanos? Just espresso and water. I like to put some heavy cream in mine. maybe some stevia if I'm feeling in the mood for a little bit of sweet. So, what do we have for this category? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my box set of none other than Jane Austen. Yes. These are not in any particular order here. If I had to rank my favorites, which I should do a whole video about that sometime. If I had to rank my favorites, this is hard. I would say probably Pride and Prejudice ranks first. And then Emma, which not everybody loves Emma. One of my favorites. Sometimes that one and Pride and Prejudice take turns being first. And then after that, probably Persuasion and Sense and Sensibility are the next two that they kind of fight for supremacy there. And then Northanger Abbey, I really like also. And Mansfield Park, I've only read once. So I keep telling myself I need to reread it because I have reread all of the rest of them at least once, except for Mansfield Park. But I don't know, that one's just not as compelling to me. But anyways, so Jane Austen, I mean, she's the queen of romance novels, and she lived in the Regency era and wrote in the Regency era, hence their Regency novels. But so she started the whole thing. I can blame her. And she is by far a favorite classic author. She has the widest reach, I guess. People who won't read other classics will probably pick up an Austen and enjoy it at some point in their lives. But it's not that easy to read because one, the writing is very different from modern writing. The sentences are longer and more complex. The vocabulary, some of those words we don't use in the same way anymore, and some of the words we just don't use. And the settings and the culture is a little bit of a foreign concept to most of us. So it is a little bit harder to access in that way. So that's why I put it in this Americano category. But it's still very enjoyable. And once you can kind of get into the rhythm of the sentences, the sentence structure, and the setting, and get the feel for the setting and the culture of how, things flow and what she's talking about, you will love it. Her dialogue is just so witty and sparkling, the best dialogue. And her characters, like you feel immersed in the story and you feel like you know them, those characters intimately. And then when you close the book, you're like, okay, where's Lizzie? I want to talk to Lizzie. But she's stuck in the book and can't talk to her. So yeah, it's a bit of a letdown when you turn the last page and close the cover. But they're very good. Jane Austen is easily my favorite author, so I could go on and on about her for a while, but I'll stop there. Okay, and now for the black coffee. So I'm not ranking these, by the way, as books that are better or worse. They're just more or less accessible in a way, I guess, is what I'm thinking of. This category, I feel like I'm starting to get to the ones where it's your average reader's probably not going to hear about it because they're not as well known, and they're not like, the top 100 books that you need to read before you die sort of books, but they are worthy classics that are still in print, still worth your time, still really good stories. So I have 3 in particular to mention, and I have an actual hard copy of one of them. So this is Romance of the Forest by Anne Radcliffe. So Jane Austen read books by Anne Radcliffe, mentioned them in her letters, mentioned them in 1 or 2 of her books. I know for sure she mentioned it in Northanger Abbey, and in fact, Northanger Abbey is a spoof on this kind of Gothic story, where you have a setting of like castle ruins and something scary going on, some kind of villain. usually a girl's virtue is at stake. That's the typical storyline, and you know, it's a harrowing kind of story. Nothing like the thrillers or horror stories of today, but along those lines, like a gentler version of that. So this was Romance of the Forest, which I read and enjoyed. I also want to read her other one, The Italian and the Mysteries of Udolpho. Udolpho. But this one, it was pretty good, and I enjoyed that one. The others I don't have copies of, so I'll put a picture on there. One was, I've read a couple by Mariah Edgeworth, and the one I want to mention is Belinda that I read. So Mariah Edgeworth was a contemporary of Austen and definitely influenced Austen. Austen mentioned her books also. I read the book Belinda, which at the time of that, as I was reading it, was a bit of a struggle for me to read. But as often happens with books that are like that, it stuck with me. There are things about it that stuck with me. So here's my thoughts from Goodreads about that one. Wow, I finally finished slogging through this one. It was slow going. A few thoughts. One, most modern critics suggest that the moral of this tale is the appropriately delicate femininity of the age in which it was written. I disagree. I believe that the moral is to think before you leap when it comes to love and marriage. And I am so confident in this. It's so obvious, people. Parenthetical statement. I don't think Edgeworth was trying to be obtuse. That I defy anyone to contradict me. Okay, so I could be wrong because I often am, but to me it's pretty cut and dry. I could definitely see the influence of this book on Austen more so than I could find in Evelina by Frances Burney. The awkward proposal by Baddeley reminded me of Collins' awful proposal in Pride and Prejudice, and the discussions on first loves and second loves was explored in Sense and Sensibility. Then there was the managing Lady Delacour, who seems like she's related to Emma. Number 3. Seriously, the hero was grooming his own bride? Sorry, I just can't get past that. Ick. So, makes you want to read it, huh? So that was an interesting one. I think it was this one. I'm pretty sure it was this one, or maybe another one that I read by her, but pretty sure it's this one. There is a female character in the story who wears pants and adopts very like macho, manly characteristics and goes around London, interacts with society and the ton like that. And apparently she was based off a real person, which I found super intriguing. All right, then, as I mentioned in this review, another one that I read was Evelina by Fanny Burney. And I described it in my Goodreads as dramatic, slapstick, and over the top. So a bit of it like a caricature satire of social life, I think, and norms of the day. But definitely enjoy the story. And again, she was one who heavily influenced Jane Austen. And so Fanny Burney, Mariah Edgeworth, Anne Radcliffe, all contemporaries aroundish the same time, maybe slightly before Austen, and heavily influenced her writing and therefore influenced romance novels and the novels that we read today. So definitely recommend their books. And that's the black coffee category. I have one more special bonus category for you. How do you feel about espresso? Double shot, needing a little extra? Definitely an acquired taste. So I have one book in this category to mention. I mentioned the author Fanny Burney, who lived slightly before Austen, but her books were very popular during the Regency era. And this is her diary, The Diary of Fanny Burney. And it was so interesting. So interesting. I'm sure it's whitewashed. I am sure that there is not a real look into the real Fanny Burney, so to speak. I'm sure that she's hiding some things, but this is still very interesting. She knew like all the who's who back in the day, but she served Queen Charlotte. She worked for her, and she was eyewitness to King George's bouts of insanity. And so she writes about them in detail in her diary. And so you get like an eyewitness account of his madness. And it's so fascinating. And she also knew other novelists of the day, like Samuel Richardson, who was one of the forerunners of the English novel, and interacted with them, hobnobbed with all of the people who were anybody back in the day. So she was like right in the thick of it, even though she herself wasn't like really a wealthy, or she didn't really have like a great lineage or anything, but she just ended up in those circles, and her books were very popular. So she was able to meet some very influential people, and she wrote about all of them. Also incredibly fascinating was she had breast cancer towards later in her life, and so she had a mastectomy, a double mastectomy. Guys, this was before anesthesiology. Like there was no knocking her out. She was conscious. There was no like the best numbing of the pain, you know, like brandy or something. Like that part was really hard to read. So, yeah, but otherwise, I mean, still fascinating though, right? Like, anyway. So, interesting book, very interesting, but definitely an esoteric taste. Not everybody's going to want to pick up uh, the Diary of Fanny Burney, but even if you have zero interest in anything else about her as an author, whatever, just the people that she knew and the people that she write about, fascinating enough. So tell me in the comments below, first of all, how do you like your coffee? And which of these books have you read and or would want to read? Or what other books would you recommend for each category? Thanks for talking to me, and I'll see you next time.